And good morning, my beautiful America. Welcome back to the All America Book Club. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the perfect read for you as we are in the month of January and we have so many things that, need our attention. We probably need to cook, we need to clean, we need to, take care of the family. But what I have found in the month of January, February, March, the winter months, they're the best months to curl up in the evening and sit with a great book by the fireplace, drinking your peppermint mocha or your hot tea. So I get the honor this morning to introduce you for the very first time, Karen Barnett. She's an author and a speaker and a former park ranger. I love her story. She has written this brand new book. It came out earlier in the fall, Through Water and Stone. I'm holding it up for the YouTube channel. So I want to encourage you to go pick it up. It's a perfect read. Talks about loss, it talks about new life, it talks about adoption, and it talks about, most importantly, our faith. So please help me welcome to the show for the very first time, Karen Barnett. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Eden. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting books with you.
Oh, absolutely. I love on your website, when I went to your website to check you out, you have the greatest quote: "Come discover the national parks through story. No hiking boots required." And I was jokingly saying to you before, well, I could find some fun, fashionable hiking boots, but they probably would not be very comfortable. But I was looking at your website. I want to encourage everybody to go over to KarenBarnettBooks.com. She's a best-selling author. And like I said, I held up Through Water and Stone. But first, I want to hear about you. You have a phenomenal background. Okay, a former park ranger and now a best-selling author. Tell me about this.
Well, I guess it was quite a leap.
It was.
Yeah. I actually, so I worked at Mount Rainier National Park when I was in graduate school, actually. So I was in graduate school at Oregon State University studying geosciences and started working at Mount Rainier as a naturalist there. And did that for a couple of summers and absolutely fell in love with the mission of the National Park Service and just the beautiful places that our country has preserved for future generations. That to me was the best job in the world until my current one. But it was a lot of fun. I went from working at Mount Rainier, got married a couple of years later, and so I started working for Oregon State Parks because my husband was still in graduate school. And so I went to work for Oregon State Parks and saw parks kind of from a different angle. State parks have a different feel than the national parks. And I just really loved working with people when they were on vacation in a beautiful place and helping to kind of open their eyes to some of the things that were around them, particularly the beauties and intricacies of God's creation. Of course, working as a federal employee or a state employee, I couldn't use that terminology, but it was always there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like how I want to read a quote because it really does resonate with what you just said. You said you had written Through Water and Stone during a season when the roles you had built in your life around you no longer felt like a steady foundation.
Mm.
And in Zion's Canyons, which is this book, you were reminded that God's power shapes both stone and hearts, and he was reshaping yours. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so Through Water and Stone is my 10th novel. So I've done this a few times now, and I kind of feel like I should have it down and it should be easy at this point. But this book was a real challenge for me because, as I said in that quote, I had hit a point in my life where it felt like everything was changing. We go through these seasons in our life where things just change. And so my kids were grown, were just recently out of the house, launched, and, well, at least for the first time. And I was having some health issues that was making it harder for me to write. It's just slowing down the whole thought process. And getting sentences out, getting story, particularly a complex novel. This is a dual timeline novel, so you have historical and modern day that mix together. So you kind of really have to pay attention to what you're writing, make sure it meshes. But I just felt like things were getting away from me. And it's when I was visiting Zion, my husband and I drove down there for a research trip. and just looking around at these canyon walls that God shaped so carefully and so beautifully, with the Virgin River running right through the middle of it. It just kind of, like I said, it reminded me that he is constantly shaping and reshaping us in the same way that he is reshaping our world around us. So it was a good reminder for me that he's in control and I'm not. So even if I feel like I'm struggling at a certain point in my life, he has a plan. He's not surprised by our struggles. He knows what's going on and he's ready to walk us through them. So the book was a great reminder for me, to kind of be still, remember that he's in control, be still and know that he is God. Remember that he is in control.
Yeah, I noticed that you put that verse
Mm.
in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, it's a verse that comes up several times through the story. And actually there's the words "be still" show up in scripture multiple times, not just that verse. That's the best known one, but it comes up multiple times. And it was fun to sort of pull that through the story and the different ways that scripture talks about being still.
And that is so hard in this culture and society that we live in.
Definitely.
You had mentioned that out of all of your books, this one was where you were getting a lot of feedback from a lot of your fans, your followers, your supporters. Was it to that aspect of being still in such a phone-dominated, screen-dominated culture?
I think so, yes. Especially since one of my main characters in the modern day timeline, she is all about career, she's career driven, she's on social media, she's doing all the things, she's making the lists and checking her boxes, and she's the one that needs to slow down. And there's something about being in a national park that if you're kind of at a scattered time in your life, these beautiful places in nature, I think can speak to us.
Yes.
It's a good place to slow down, to relax, to just be still, to just enjoy the creation that God gave us. And so I think has spoken to a lot of my readers who have read others of my national park books, but this one really pushed in on that idea of the national parks being a place where we can heal from emotional wounds, from day-to-day life. It's just a good place to reset.
Well, a lot of the things that you talk about in this book, I highlighted some things. There was loss, new life, a return to Zion. And I was thinking, how biblical.
Right.
I was like,
it just writes itself.
It really does. Adoption, adoption in God's view, and adoption here on this earth. Talk to us about how you interwove this. I mean, I can read this whole press release, but I'd love to hear you describe the characters and each character as they were developing, and how you just said it was a very challenging time for you. And you can see that because of the different things that I just mentioned.
Right. The story opens in 1948 with park ranger Henry Eriksson and his wife Alma, who are actually mourning the loss of a child. That happens before the story opens. And so they're still going through that grief process. And in his day-to-day patrols at Zion, he's on his horse riding past the Virgin River, and he happens to stumble across an abandoned infant in a hat box that's hidden there next to the river. And this kicks off a whole bunch. I mean, if you imagine if having lost a child, then just finding a child, this lost and found themes going on there, how difficult that would be. And so it kind of opens up the mystery of where did this child come from, who is his mother, what's going to happen to him in the future. And he and Alma end up taking this child into their lives and into their hearts. But the mysteries surrounding him swirl throughout the years that go by in the historical timeline. And then in the modern timeline, when my character Talia, my career-driven woman, comes back to Zion to sort of reset her life, she stumbles across this mystery after taking a DNA test, like a lot of us have done those hobby DNA tests. And she learns some surprises about her background and ends up digging into this old family mystery. And so, this idea of kind of found family, that family isn't always what we imagine, the mom, dad, 2+ kids. It's the people that God brings into our lives. And, it can be our biological family, it can be adopted family, it can be people that God just places in front of us,
Yes.
that he gives us the people that we need in our lives. And
Yes.
yeah.
Very well put. Very well put. I wanted to ask you, with this book, will there be one? Are people already asking for the next? Because I was looking at your site and you do have it, this series. So that's my first question. But my other question is, has the National Park Service thanked you? Because I bet you have driven up tourism with your book series, and the fact that you talk about it from a spiritual faith perspective and so many different things that we find in our life, where you really weren't able to do that when you were in the National Park Service. Like you said earlier, it was
Mhm.
really, you were limited. You were limited, censored, if you will, and what you were allowed to say about your faith. But people saw faith in you. I mean, how can they not? But my point in saying that is, another book at hand, but then also, have they thanked you? Because you have really, I think you have really educated another generation.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't expect thanks from them. They're actually dealing with too many tourists in some cases, particularly
Oh, I didn't
Zion.
realize that.
Oh,
Oh,
Zion
okay.
in particular is, yeah.
Really? Okay.
So they're probably not thinking thank you, but I have seen one of my novels is carried in Yellowstone's
Yes,
National
saw
Park
that.
bookstores, which I find just thrilling.
That's
To
congratulations.
that a Christian novel is sitting there on the shelf next to all of these other books about the national park. So I'm excited about that. I have met a lot of rangers in my research, doing research. I talked to a lot of the rangers and I talked to a lot of them online, and they are fantastic resources of information. They just love talking about their park, as I
Oh,
did when I worked for the National Park Service too. So it's a joy to work with them and speak with them and hear their perspective on what's going on
yeah.
in our national parks.
Was that hard for you to leave at first?
Oh yeah, definitely. I feel like a piece of my heart still lives at Mount Rainier. I
It
actually got
sounds like it does.
Yeah, I got to live in the park because it was too far to drive from any local communities. So, in the evenings, and people would, go home, go off for mealtime and such. We would have that place up there to ourselves, and early morning sunrise over the mountain. You just don't forget those things. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to, a lot of our kids in our schools now don't hear about Teddy Roosevelt, but he was the person that implemented the National Park Service. And as they want to tear down his statue and New York City, in my old neighborhood, if they realize what he did for this country, and you got to experience that firsthand.
Right, right. Yes, he was our conservation president and founded or established many of our
Yeah,
national parks. So
yeah,
his
yeah.
legacy is definitely out there.
What was you left the National Park Service and you started writing, but really what was that turning point that got you on the writing journey? Because I'm sure you had in your heart, I'm going to write about all these parks, but what really, was it somebody that inspired you, that came alongside of you and said, you have this talent?
It was more dusting off an old dream for me. I had dreamed of writing books since I was a little kid. Have filled notebooks with stories when I was younger, and those need to be burned someday. When I die, someone needs to go through and burn those, so no one ever sees that. But yeah, so when I stopped, so I worked for state parks for a number of years, and then my husband and I wanted to start a family. And since I was working tourist hours, he was working office hours. We were just like never crossing. And
Yeah.
so I decided, good time to be a stay-at-home mom. The perfect job for a stay-at-home mom would be being an author. And I, could
Yeah.
have the baby in a little Moses basket next to the computer while I typed my novels. Totally unrealistic. I had no clue what being a mom was going to involve. And so it wasn't until my kids were in all-day school that I really kind of had the mental space to
Yeah.
accomplish anything along those lines. But yeah, it was dusting off an old dream for me. I wrote 4 novels that were more traditional historical romance, my first 4. And then my agent asked, what would you really love to write next? And
Yeah.
the national parks were definitely what it's like. This was the best, well, I wouldn't say the best time in my life, but just a very memorable time in my life.
Oh, absolutely.
Can't think of a better, more romantic, more adventurous location for a novel. And then being able to set them in different parks. So you mentioned series. It's a series in
Yeah.
that they're all national parks, but they're not related stories. So you
Okay.
can read them in any order. You just kind of
Okay.
pick your favorite national park. I know you have a lot of listeners in the DC area. I have one set at Great Smoky Mountains. So, you know.
Okay. Oh, no, that's great. I was going to mention, I was looking at the quote on here that you said, scripture says faith can move mountains, but I found time spent in the mountains sometimes moves us toward faith. And I have to tell my audience this really quickly. We have about 4 minutes left, but I was driving to Nashville from Eastern North Carolina. So we're by the beach. Beach is my healing, like
Mhm.
the parks are yours.
Yeah.
And I was driving and decided, oh, I'll take the quick way and I'll go up the mountain around Asheville and then come back down. And I called my husband with a panic attack. And I'm like, I'm at the top of this mountain and I'm about to lose it. I did not know how to process, but here's the scriptural and the faith application. We get so used to being in the valley.
Mhm.
We don't know how to accept the mountain.
Right. Right. Yep. And
Yeah.
the imagery between the mountain and the valley is very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah,
We have
completely.
those times in our lives, the ups and the downs, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So when I read that quote, it instantly took me back to the panic attack. I'm on top of a mountain. Help me get off. But it hit me. And like God was talking to me the whole time. How about this mountain?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
made that. Isn't that impressive?
I know.
God says I made that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Don't
So
take that out of context.
anyway, I love what you're doing. And you know what? I also love you're educating people like myself. You're educating my audience about the importance of the national parks with your books. And you had mentioned Smoky Mountains.
Mhm.
And are there, I looked on your website. I want to point everybody back to your website because I see where trees touch the sky when stone wings fly. Those are part of the park series. Is correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I get those right?
Right.
Okay. And then I see Road Paradise, Where the Fire Falls, Ever Faithful. Are those also because they have the look that they have? Okay, their covers show that. Which one is in Yellowstone?
Ever Faithful is in
Ever
Yellowstone.
Faithful. Okay. Okay. So you have been writing this whole series for how long?
Oh, that's a good question. My first novel came out in 2013. I'm not good with numbers, so and then I
No,
wrote.
neither am I. That's why I do.
So I think 2016 was when the first of my national park novels came out, and so I've done 6 of them, covered 6 national parks, working
Mm.
on the next one now. So
Well, you know what? I'm sitting here thinking about the audience, the Capitol Hill staff members, elected leaders who aren't even familiar with the parks, and just wanting to educate them on the parks, but also as you link in faith and family, and you link in also the freedom component, which the show is based on. So I
Mhm.
want to encourage people to go up and pick up your books. And like I said at the very beginning, great reads for the winter months, but it also prepares you and your family or your roommates or your church group or whatever to go on a trip to explore.
Yeah.
And when is the best time to explore? I mean, being here on the East Coast, I would have no clue. What would that look like?
Well, it depends on the park. We
Yeah.
went to Zion in November, and it was November. Yes, we went in November and it was beautiful. It was
Mhm.
absolutely incredible. We went to Death Valley in February, and that was
Oh,
incredible. Wouldn't go to Death Valley in July. Um, but then we just went to Glacier National Park, and you really kind of have to hit Glacier in the summertime because their season is so short. Mount Rainier is kind of the same way. But a lot
okay.
of the parks, my preference is to hit them in what they call the shoulder season, which
Okay.
is late spring, early fall, so that if you're not having to bring along, if you're not bringing along children that are in school, that you have to
Sure.
work around their school schedule, it's best to go when school's in session because it's, not quite as busy during those times. So, but do
So it's
look at each park and, look on their websites and they'll give you that information as to when the best time to visit would be.
okay. No, that sounds great. Final note, we have 4 seconds left. You already said be still and know. Any other words of scripture and where, again, I just want to remind people where they can find you to get all your books.
Sure. Well, one of the verses that keeps coming up in this novel is, of course, Psalm 20, it is 23, right? I'm looking at it real quickly just to make sure I don't say it wrong on the air.
No?
Psalm 23, which is where he makes me lie down
Yes.
in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. That is one that goes through the novel and is a very important one to me. The idea of God taking us to these places of stillness is important for me to remember through my life when everything is swirling out of control. So where people can find me, my website is KarenBarnettBooks.com. So make sure and add the books on the end or you go someplace else. So KarenBarnettBooks.com. And I have a newsletter called the Compass Club. If you love national parks and you love novels, I have like travel tips and behind the scenes stories and all kinds of fun stuff in there. So you might enjoy signing up for that.
I love it. Karen Barnett, it's been a blessing to have you here. I'm so glad to know you. I'm glad to endorse this book. And I'm also, for all those on the YouTube channel, but I'm also welcoming you back anytime. We'd love to have you. And thank you for just the foundations of faith.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. For all those who are tuning in, stay tuned for our next segment. We'll be right back.